The Caribbean, some of the islands at least, are rich with natural resources, oil, bauxite. We're not one of those. But generally, what the region lacks, two very important resources, capital and an entrepreneurial mindset. How do we go about achieving that, or addressing that issue?
Before I talk about this, I want to say something very quickly. I, for one, don't believe in resources as a necessity for prosperity. Okay? That notion that we need resources to be successful has never been more incorrect, you know, today than it has been 20 years, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Tell me about Japan. Tell me about Japan's natural resources. Do they have uranium, gold, diamond, timber? Japan has almost nothing except its people, right? And for the longest, for the greater part of the entire 19th and 20th century, and in the turn of this current century, Japan was the number 2 economy in the world, right? It's about how you organize, how you utilize knowledge to add value. The key thing to transformation and economic growth is not physical capital. It's really intellectual capital. It's the knowledge that connects the services that make things work. This is what really matters, and not just the resources. Guyana, by contrast, within the CARICOM, endowed with bauxite, with diamonds, with gold, with all kinds of things. Is it making use of those resources? We see no evidence of it. So, resources, as far as I'm concerned, are hardly the issue. It's those with the mastermind, those with the skill to assemble the resources in a sensible way to bring about value, to bring about the transformation. They are the ones who reap the big rewards in life. It's not just the resource holder. Okay.
Now, we've heard some of your criticisms of the current administration. I want to get from you, have they done anything right?
The current administration? I mean, the point, it's a difficult question. I mean, we're discussing the economy. I don't want to, I'm not an authority in all the other sectors, and I don't want to pronounce on the other sectors. I think the current administration has done extremely well in the area of sports. To some extent, you know, one might say youth empowerment, you know, giving people a sense of self-worth. I commend what they did when they built the Beausejour grounds, one of the best in the world, and I think they deserve the credit for having brought Saint Lucia on the world stage in terms of cricket. We were nowhere close in that area. Some of the social programs seem to have been well thought through. However, we talk about the economic side. The economic side is very weak, and it's not just what my opinion is; it's what the data say. Unemployment has worsened. The GDP is not doing well. The balance of payment the deficit is worsening, and so on. So one cannot argue that things are getting better. And this is not about one being critical. It's what the numbers actually say.
Okay. The small business sector. We heard just this morning the Ministry of Commerce and Business Development launched a small enterprise development framework or model.
Yes.
Designed to bring a number of players together to help accelerate the development of the small business sector. There's no doubt the importance of the small business sector. We heard the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Preville, talking about the fact that they account for 75% of the private sector. So the significance is not, we can't argue that. But are you satisfied that enough is being done, or the policies, government's policies, reflect the critical importance or the value of the small business sector?
I think there has been a few things in the past that seem to have been working, but a lot more needs to be done. The small businesses, you know, I mean, you have a number of challenges facing small businesses. Generally, they are weak in terms of overall capacity. There's a need for a lot of capacity building. They face constraints in terms of access to finance, we have an archaic banking system. The banking system does not, the banking system doesn't really care about productive economy. It cares about consumption. So you can get a bank loan to go and buy the fanciest car, but if you have the most fabulous business idea, the business plan, no one wants to touch it unless it's been scrutinized 5,000 times and you have 10 times the capital that you need to invest. I mean, it's not going to work. You have there's a host of other challenges that the small businesses face, and I think things like standards. It's difficult for them to become ISO and HACCP compliant so that they could be players on the world stage. Where they are services driven businesses, you have issues of recognition of qualifications, because unless your qualification has an equivalent meaning to that of the country you're trading your services with, it constitutes a barrier to you. So there is a need for probably more technical and vocational training to uplift those businesses. There are a number of areas where small business requires assistance, and I think it is important, if not imperative, that government undertakes a comprehensive stock take of those areas and looks at creative ways of assisting those businesses. I want to say that most of the time people complain and say there is no money, there is no money, there is no money. But there is a lot of money out there, There's a lot of money out there. Compete Caribbean, right? In Barbados, there's a fund, there's an envelope of about $30-something million for development assistance work. You have Caribbean Microfinance. It has a whole bunch of money. I can give you the actual numbers if you wish a little later on. You have European Union EDF funding, for example, on the EPA implementation. People who want to actually export services, goods, whatever, to European Union, there are lots of envelopes they could tap into for funding. You have the EPA standby facility, right? You have the IDB has 3 or so envelopes of funds. There's a lot of money out there. I think there is a problem of ignorance. People are not aware of what's available. And number one. Number two, sometimes where they are aware of what's available, they have no idea how to actually access those funds, because it requires project proposals, it requires certain understanding of the donor modalities and so on. But there is money available, and we need to start thinking less about what the constraints are and more about where the opportunities are for us to actually achieve things.
Okay, I just want to remind the viewers that the lines are open. You can call in at any point from now on. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments on our discussion this evening. You touched on something that I wanted to bring up a little later on. As the EPA, you were part of the negotiation process. Are you at all satisfied that we are taking advantage of the opportunities that agreement has opened up for us?
I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied. And I know we are at a very nascent stage of implementation. Implementation is also a bit of a challenge because Saint Lucia has to do a number of things. Saint Lucia has to enact a number of bits of legislation and in some cases regulations to make things work. There is a whole slew of legislation that needs to come into, that needs to be passed in Parliament, and one of the big problems is the unavailability of legislative drafters to actually draft those legislations. So what you face is a situation where you need to enact a number of bits of legislation in areas of, say, services, intellectual property rights, even some multilateral agreements on the environment and labor standards, etc. Those things are all sitting, waiting to happen, but there is no one to even draft the laws. So we're not even at the 0 point. On the side of goods, you have, of course, the tariff cuts that need to be introduced for phasing out the tariffs on goods coming from the European Union side. And You need, of course, training. I know Saint Lucia's customs is pretty advanced in terms of the automated system they're using, Asicular, and in terms of trade facilitation issues. But a lot more work needs to be done. We need to have, for example, a single electronic window. We need to simplify the whole process of clearance of entries, have it even further simplified. We need to ensure that we have stronger systems of audit, and especially the post-entry audit, and a number of other areas need strengthening, for example, including customs valuation techniques, which are not all very straightforward techniques. So there are a number of things that need to be done for the EPA to become effective. And the Achilles heel of that whole process seems to be the legislative agenda. We need to get that done right, and then the implementation process is going to get smoother afterwards.
Okay, we have our first call. Good evening, you're on the air. Oh, we lost that call. But I understand what you're saying, but then here we are inviting the Taiwanese. We had a mission go over to Taiwan, talking about creating partnerships with Taiwanese businesses, bringing Taiwanese businesses down here so that they can take advantage of the EPA. We're not in a position to take advantage of it ourselves.
Well, the idea, of course, is not that, you know, St. Lucians and St. Lucian interests alone capitalize on the agreement. It's an agreement that is meant to stimulate investment.
We have a call. Let's take that call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening, Dr. Preville.
Hi.
I can't hear the person.
One question.
Okay.
Being that Step, Nice, Smile, LEAP, and all these programs are non-productive social programs, what is the general view when the government can spend almost $5 million on a property just to house those offices that they basically house non-productive sectors of the economy, and they don't really bring back any returns? All the jobs are taxpayers paying jobs. I don't even think that people pay in NIC. What is your view on that in light of what you said about the non-productive nature of our economy?
Okay, I think the caller missed your earlier response to the issue of STEP. She's asking your view on STEP, the fact that it's taxpayers paying jobs, while the government is spending $5 million to house offices for non-productive sectors.
Yeah, I mean, I've already addressed the issue early on, so yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, you know, one sympathizes with what government is trying to do, which is to bring temporary relief, but that comes at a huge cost, okay? And this is my fundamental problem with it. One has to rethink the way this thing works, and that money should be going more into creating productive capacity. I alluded to for example, freshwater shrimp or fish, whatever cultivation, and something that actually brings returns and creates jobs, and not just something that is an artificial job created for one person, and that's not sustainable, you know.
Okay. What I want to do is take a break so we can rectify some technical issues, and when we come back, we'll take your calls. You're watching Newsmaker Live. I'm Kindal Berton. Our guest this evening, Dr. Claudius Preville, the Managing Director of Preville & Associates Consulting Group. We're talking about the economy and a number of other issues. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation.